This one is called The Best Nest. Mr. Bird was happy. He was so happy he had to sing. This was Mr. Bird's song. I love my house, I love my nest, and all the world, my nest is best.
Then Mrs. Bird came out of the house. It's not the best nest, she said, just like her mother.
I'm tired of this old place, said Mrs. Bird. I hate it. Let's look for a new place right now.
So they left the old place to look for a new one. This place looks nice, said Mr. Bird. Let's move in here. You think that hole's going to be a good place to live?
But somebody else had already moved in. So they looked at another house. This one looks nice, said Mr. Bird, and there's nobody in it.
How about that shoe? Is that a good place to live? You're wrong, said Mrs. Bird. This house belongs to a foot.
Well, they almost got squished. So they went on looking. I like this one, said Mr. Bird. It has a pretty red flag on the roof. I've always wanted a house with a flag, said Mrs. Bird. Maybe this place will be all right.
But is it?
What does that say on the side?
But it was not all right. I guess I made a mistake, said Mr. Bird.
It's a mailbox. You make too many mistakes, said Mrs. Bird. I'm going to pick the next house, and here it is, right here. It's in a church tower. Is that a good place? In the steeple of the church?
They flew in. They looked around. Isn't it too big? Asked Mr. Bird. I like this big place, said Mrs. Bird. This is the place to build our new nest.
They worked so hard. They went right to work. They needed many things to build their nest. First they got some hay.
Then they got some soda straws and broom straws. They got some sweater string.
They got some stocking string and mattress stuffing.
They got some horsehair. They got some man hair.
Ouch! Soon they had all the hay, all the straw, all the string, all the stuffing, all the horsehair, and all the man hair they could carry. They took it all back to build their nest.
Mr. and Mrs. Bird worked very hard. It took them the rest of the morning to finish their nest. This nest is really the best, said Mrs. Bird. I want to stay here forever.
Uh-oh, did they put it in a good place? Mr. Bird was very happy too. He flew to the top of his house. He sang his song again. I love our house, I love our nest. In all the world, our nest is best. He was so busy singing, he didn't even see Mr. Parker coming.
Uh-oh, what's Mr. Parker going to do? Every day at 12 o'clock, Mr. Parker came to the church. Mr. Parker came to pull a rope. The rope went up to the bird's new nest.
The rope rang the big bell right under Mrs. Bird's nest. Bong, bong, bong.
Mrs. Bird got out of there as fast as she could fly. Bong, 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 bong.
The Just like Grandma and Grandpa's clock, huh? When Mr. Bird came in, all he could see was a mess of hay and string and stuffing and horsehair and manhair and straws. Where was Mrs. Bird?
I will look for her until I find her, said Mr. Bird. He looked high. He looked low. He looked everywhere for Mrs. Bird.
He looked down into a chimney, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there, thank goodness.
He looked down into a water barrel, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there either.
Then he saw a big fat cat. There was a big fat smile on the fat cat's face. There were some pretty brown feathers near the fat cat's mouth. Mr. Bird began to cry. "Oh dear," he cried, "this big fat cat has eaten Mrs. Bird." His heart is broken.
Mr. Bird flew off. "I'll never see Mrs. Bird again," he cried. It was getting dark. It began to rain. It rained harder and harder. Mr. Bird could not see where he was going.
Crash! Mr. Bird bumped into something.
What do you think he bumped into? It was his old house. That old house that Mrs. Bird hated. "I'll go inside," said Mr. Bird. "I'll rest here until the rain stops."
What do you think is going to happen? Mr. Bird went in, and there was Mrs. Bird, sitting there, singing, "I love my house, I love my nest, and all the world, this nest is best." They look so happy. They're happy to see each other, and...
"You here?" gasped Mr. Bird. "I thought you hated this old nest."
Mrs. Bird smiled. "I used to hate it," she said, "but a mother bird can change her mind. You see, there's no nest like an old nest for a brand new bird." Is there a bird in that egg? A baby bird, maybe? I'll spill it this way.
And when the egg popped open, the new bird liked it too.
And they lived happily ever after with their family in their best nest. We hope you like their stories. We love you. Bye.
Bye.